Well, it is that time of the week, or in Kyle Kraska's world, that time of the every once in a while. The NFC West Huddle with our favorite folks from our Fox affiliates around the division. In Phoenix, we've got Richard Sines. In San Francisco, Bailey O'Carroll. And this is a very special night because Kyle Kraska is joining us despite working around the clock covering the Dodgers in the World Series. Kyle, we know you've been busy, but we are capping Freddie Freeman references on this show to 2 tonight, so use them very wisely, okay? Great to have you guys here. We're going to start with the best bets right off the bat. Give me something you absolutely expect to happen in your team's game this weekend. Kyle, we're going to start with you. The Rams at the Seahawks. What will absolutely happen this weekend?
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome here to Dodger Stadium. As you can see, it's a little empty behind me right now, but I'm here early awaiting the big championship parade tomorrow morning. But excited to talk a little football with all of you. And if you're looking for a best bet for the Rams against the Seahawks, death, taxes, and Kyren Williams scoring a touchdown. He has 14 TDs over his last 10 games this season alone in 7 games, 8 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. Kyren Williams will be in the end zone on Sunday. And I know a lot of people may be thinking, well, you got Cooper Kupp back, you got Puka Nacua back, only one football. How many touches can this guy get? Well, against the Vikings with both of those guys back in the lineup, he had 30 touches on the day. That is a season high for Kyren Williams. So without a doubt, plan not only on the Rams winning the game, but we'll get to that later, Kyren Williams scoring a touchdown.
Yeah, and that number 30 carries last week, that would be a nightmare for the Seahawks given their defensive rushing stats, which we will also get to. As for the Seahawks, I'm going to come out hot tonight. Take the Seahawks plus 1.5 points this weekend. This spread basically says that the Rams would be a 4.5-point favorite on a neutral site, or a 7.5-point favorite if this game was in Los Angeles. You couldn't find a better out there that would take the Rams by more than a touchdown in LA against the Seahawks. So I know it's only 1.5 points in Seattle, but the wrong team is favored here. The Rams haven't won a single game on the road this season. They're 0-3. The Hawks have not lost 4 straight home games since 2008. The players have heard how embarrassing that loss to the Bills was all week long. I think pride sets in. I think the Ernest Jones revenge factor sets in. Take the Hawks and the 1.5. That is my best bet of this week. Meanwhile, Richard, the Cardinals are hosting the Bears. Give me your best bet for Sunday's game.
Well, first of all, I just want to apologize right off the bat. I didn't know this was a costume party. I would have worn a costume. I mean, Kyle looks like he's the baby of Freddy Krueger and Freddie Freeman. Aaron, you're Mr. Universe, and Bailey wins with Miss USA. So I didn't know. I guess I'll be Charlie Brown or Super Mario or something like that. Those are some of the better costumes I had as a kid. But as far as my best bet goes, bet the over in this game. I think the two teams combined will score over 45 points. I think it's going to be a bit of a shootout. Caleb Williams and the Bears are going to be looking to redeem themselves after that heartbreaking loss to Washington. And you know what? Just because I'm nice, I'm cool like that, I'm going to give you a second bet. Take the over in this game. Take Kyler Murray for rushing over 50 yards in this game. If the Bears defense had trouble with Jaden Daniels running around when he was injured, I think a healthy Kyler Murray and an offense that's on the uptick is going to do very well against this Bears defense. And so take the over of 45 points or more and Kyler Murray rushing for over 50 yards.
Bailey, I didn't mean to get to you last year, but because the 49ers are off this weekend, you can focus on any of our games or an early preview of next week's Niners game at Tampa Bay.
Yeah, well, I've already started looking ahead to Tampa Bay. The bye week is for the Niners. I think one thing is for sure that they will, and I knock on wood here because it is the Niners wherever there is wood around me, that they will be healthier heading into Tampa Bay. Obviously, this team has been just incredibly beat up, especially on the offensive side, really all season long. It started back in training camp, and of course, BA goes down. So I think best bet is that they will be healthier come Tampa Bay. But I say Deebo Samuel gets into the end zone. They have Juwan Jennings back. But I think this is kind of Deebo's time to shine. We know that he was in the hospital a couple of weeks ago dealing with pneumonia and then just dealing with kind of little injuries here and there. I think he's going to take this week to get healthy, get back to the Deebo that everybody in the Bay Area, I should say, knows and loves. And I think he will definitely find his way into the end zone this next weekend.
Okay, next up, how about the biggest key for your team this week? Richard, we'll start with you. I think the Cardinals should just throw up a whole bunch of Hail Marys because the Bears will be too busy taunting your fans.
Yeah, that I still can't get over that. I don't know what those Bears defensive backs were thinking. That was nuts. We were watching that live, and of course, Jaden Daniels, being a former Sun Devil, the whole newsroom went nuts. But I think, speaking of, quarterbacks, the key to victory for the Arizona Cardinals is to put pressure, defense, right? Get after the rookie Caleb Williams, right? You got to put pressure on the quarterback in general, no matter who it is, whether it's Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. But when you get a rookie quarterback back there, if you put pressure on them, their eyes get a little bit bigger, and those butterflies get as big as chickens in their stomach, right? And Caleb Williams has proven that if you give him time, he can hurt you, right? He's got the arm strength, and he's got a couple weapons on offense. So get pressure on the quarterback, which has kind of been an issue for the Arizona Cardinals, to get to the quarterback and get him off and rattle him, knock him down. Even if you don't sack him, just disrupt him and disrupt that offense. So I think that's going to be the key to victory. Put pressure on the rookie, make him make a quick decision, get him out of his comfort zone, and then let your defensive backs, guys like Budda Baker, do the rest.
Well, Bailey, the Niners are off this week, so where's the area they need to focus on the most as they prepare for the second half of the season?
Other than what I touched on last time, which is focusing on not getting hurt and getting healthy, staying healthy, special teams, I think that really hasn't been a secret all season long. Last week, I asked Kyle Shanahan how he grades their special teams. Right now, they're ranked 31st out of 32 teams. So really almost nowhere to go other than up. I guess they could slide one spot back, but Kyle Shanahan was pretty brutally honest about it, saying that there is a whole lot of space for them to improve when it comes to special teams. They hope, of course, that they get Jake Moody back, kicker, after this bye week. So we'll just have to wait and see, but it's definitely that special teams unit, and Kyle Shanahan knows it. I think a lot of question marks have come out. Will the special teams coordinator, will he stick around throughout the whole season? That's a big question mark. Will changes come? We just don't know, but I think that's the area that they most notably need to improve on.
Okay, well, as for the Seahawks, we've discussed it before. It's all about the run game, their ability to stop the run, and their ability to run the ball on offense. 4 straight teams have rushed for more than 150 yards against Seattle. The Hawks are now 29th in the league defending the run. They're 29th in the league rushing on offense as well. And it was embarrassing last week because the Bills had allowed an average of 150 rushing yards on the road all season long, and the Hawks had just 32 and only 1 rushing yard in the first half. I think this is the week we start to see these numbers finally turn around. I mentioned Ernest Jones. He had 15 tackles last week. That was a career high. As he gets more comfortable in this defense and as Tyrell Dodson adjusts to playing on the outside and the D linemen do a better job of setting the edge, that's going to make for a much more effective run defense. To Kyle's point, would I still start Kyren Williams if he was on my fantasy team? Yes, but I think we start to see improvement in that regard. And then offensively, this is the week you challenge your offensive line. Either get the job done or you'll be replaced. Charles Cross, probably the only O-lineman on the Seahawks whose job is safe right now, even though the backups aren't that great either. Finally, let's head to Kyle. Whenever Sean McVay comes to town, he usually wears a hoodie, and I think of that Avril Lavigne song because he looks like a skater boy. What's the biggest key for McVay and the Rams this weekend?
The key for the Rams to win this game this weekend over the Seahawks is to show up. Show up. Do not miss the flight to Seattle. Do not miss the team bus from the hotel to Lumen Field. Do not get stuck in traffic. Show up, and the Rams win this football game. I mean, come on, Aaron, you've already said it for the most part. This is a horrible rushing defense, and it is about to meet Kyren Williams, who's having a spectacular season. I mentioned earlier already 8 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. He's been spectacular in the fact that now you've got Cooper Kupp and you got Puka Nacua, other options for Matthew Stafford. That's just going to open up the run game even more. And you talked about it. Seattle's run defense, are you kidding me? Averaging, 148 rushing yards per game? It's a joke. So Kyren Williams is going to run all over this team. I was on this program after week 3 when Seattle was 3-0, and I was asked the question, will the Seahawks still be on top of this division come Christmas? And I laughed out loud. Boy, that was a good, jolly laugh, because I said they're not going to be in first place come Halloween. And here we are, the weekend after Halloween, the Rams go in, they clobber the Seahawks, and suddenly they could be in dead last, quite frankly, by Halloween weekend. So, yeah, if the Rams show up, they're going to win this game. And I completely disagree with everything you said about the point spread in this one. You're right. The Rams favorite on the road, that pretty much says it all right there. I'm going to take I'll lay down those points for you, and I think Rams going to win this one big.
Well, I'll say to your point, Halloween has now passed, and they are tied for first place in the division. So you were close there. And also, the week before the Falcons game, the Falcons had 200 yards of rushing, and what did the Seahawks do? They went into Atlanta and beat them by 20 points. So I will defend the Hawks there, and we'll see what happens on Sunday. Our third topic tonight, who is the biggest fantasy football disappointment on your team this season? And it cannot be an obvious player that has been injured for most of the season. And if you owned this player, would you keep him or drop him going forward? Bailey, you're first. I know Richard's Chimichangas have dealt with the Christian McCaffrey injury. So have the Niners. That's why I said to avoid injured players. So who else has been a disappointment, and do you keep him or drop him moving forward?
Yeah, CMC was at the top of my list. That's the number one thing I get here in the Bay Area is people are like, can you grade my fantasy football team? They're like, well, I took Christian McCaffrey first overall, and all I can do is really just apologize, right? Like, what can you do? It's unfortunate. Nobody really saw it coming, at least to the degree the injury that Christian McCaffrey has. But him to the side and BA to the side, Brandon Ayuk to the side, because, of course, he suffered that horrible knee injury a couple weeks ago. I'm going to say Debo, only because I don't think has been, right? He comes into the season wide receiver 1. He hasn't put up numbers that I think most people thought he was going to put up. Brock has so many mouths to feed when it comes to this offense. You got George Kittle. Coming into the season, you had Brandon Ayuk. You thought you had Christian McCaffrey. Jawan Jennings, I can't forget him. He's been out for a couple of weeks. But I think Debo has been the biggest disappointment. And then aside from individual players, I think the Niners defense hasn't really done all that everybody thought they would, given the roster they have. I mean, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, all those guys, you think that they could be the best defense in the NFL, and they just really have kind of looked lackadaisical at times. Not in the Seattle game, I'll say that, but other times they really just haven't looked, I think, as good as they do on paper.
Well, Kyle, you're up next. You're not allowed to say Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua, but who has actually played a lot and been a disappointment this year?
Well, this is actually really easy, because if you tell me I have to eliminate anybody that's been significantly injured on this team, then that pretty much eliminates everybody. The only person left would be Matthew Stafford. And of course, that makes perfect sense, because without all of his weapons that have been injured for most of the season, Matthew Stafford has been rather pedestrian. You look at his numbers prior to the Vikings game 10 days ago, which, by the way, is another advantage for the Rams, the fact they've had 10 days to prepare for this football game. But you look prior to that Vikings game, and Matthew Stafford had 3 touchdown passes on the entire season. And then you get those 2 guys that I'm not allowed to say their names of while I'm talking here, but those 2 guys, one last name begins with K, the other's first name begins with P. And between the 2 of them, Stafford had 4 touchdown passes in one game, okay, surpassing what he did in the first 6 weeks of the season. So by adding those guys, and then again, Kyren Williams out of the backfield, who is a very capable pass receiver, Matthew Stafford's going to have not only a big game this weekend, but moving forward. And he's been kind of in the shadows all year long. And I'm sure anyone that picked him up, you may be able to pick him up off the waiver wire right now. So if I'm going to look for a quarterback to start right now, it's Matthew Stafford. From this point forward, if this team remains healthy, Matthew Stafford's going to have himself one heck of a season.
As for the Seahawks, from a fantasy perspective, I'm going to go with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and maybe it's just because I was screaming his name from the hilltops at the beginning of this year, so I could have unrealistic expectations for him. He's 24th in receiver fantasy points in PPR leagues, so that's not terrible. What is terrible is that he is 135th in yards per reception. They're using him behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage on screens, but they're not pushing him down the field like we expected. I mean, this is a kid that had 15 catches for 347 yards in one game in the Rose Bowl at Ohio State. He can stretch the field. Ryan Grubb took advantage of that with Rome Odunze at UW last year. It looked like he was going to do that with JSN during OTAs and training camp, but it just hasn't been there for him during this regular season. So is it a horrible year for JSN? No, it's a second year. It's not. But I was expecting a lot more. Just one touchdown from him as well. I am an optimist, though, and he's on my fantasy team. He's staying on my starting roster every single week going forward. And Richard, down in Arizona, who's disappointing you so far this season?
Well, before I get to that, I just want to ask you a couple questions. Do you know why Kyle is wearing sunglasses today? You know why?
Why?
Because his future is so bright. Oh. And my other question is, should we refer to Bailey as Bailey for the rest of the segment or Miss America because of her costume? And then I have a comment real quick. I remember when Kyle was talking about when you mentioned about Seattle being in first place later in the year. I thought it was a joke. I wrote it down in my diary. I wrote it down. I said, Aaron made a joke. I laughed about it later that night. I could not believe you were thinking that Seattle would remain in first place when they were playing, quarterbacks like Bo Nix and Skylar Thompson when the Cardinals were playing, Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford. So anyway, that's my comment. Now, when it comes to Fantasy Island and the disappointment, it's got to be Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Arizona Cardinals, right? He hasn't even been Maserati Marv this year. It's been more like Mazda Miata Marv, right? And it's not really his fault when you really think about it. I blame Drew Petzing, the offensive coordinator, for not getting him the ball enough. And the two instances where he's had success this year, in that first quarter earlier in the year, and then, of course, last week in Miami, when they get him the ball, when they get him targets, he's done well. So I hope that changes. And you were mentioning my fantasy football team, the Chimichangas. We were disappointed we didn't get him in the draft. We tried to pull off some trades and move up on the draft boards in our war room. We were all excited about an opportunity to get him, but we didn't get him. We ended up with Christian McCaffrey, who's been a disappointment, but you say we can't mention injured players. So, yes, Maserati Marv has been more like Mazda Miata Marv, and hopefully that will change, but he's been a disappointment when it comes to Fantasy Island.
How many editions of that diary do you have? Is that the same one that you started with at the beginning of the season, or are you writing so much that we're on to like the next novel here?
I've had this diary since I was 9 years old, and this is what I looked like when I was 9. So yeah, the business will age you, and so I write it down, a lot of the stuff. I don't keep receipts, right? Everybody says I keep receipts. I get it down in the diary. That's how I do it.
Fair enough. Finally, we'll end the show with some smack talk, as if we haven't done some already. Give me a player that you just can't stand from a different team in this division, and tell me why. I'm going to go first. It's Deebo Samuel for me because he has absolutely killed the Seahawks over the years. 7 games, 7 total touchdowns. 5 of the 7 games he's played against Seattle, he has at least 102 receiving yards. Under the Pete Carroll regime, he killed the Hawks over the middle because he was always seemingly wide open. And for years, I've been asking why the Seahawks can't use DK Metcalf in a similar way as Deebo in the running game. George Kittle, by the way, probably a close number 2 because he has 7 touchdown catches in the last 5 games against the Seahawks. Kyle, you're up next. Which player on the Niners, Cardinals, or Seahawks do you dislike the most, and why?
Well, I'll get there in a moment, but first, in response to Richard, I want to say, I'm here at Dodger Stadium, which Tommy Lasorda, he kind of nicknamed it Blue Heaven on Earth. So I'm wearing the blue sunglasses because instead of looking through rose-colored glasses, I'm looking through blue-colored glasses because we're all about the Dodgers winning the championship over the New York Yankees. So we're just loving life. And I also got to give Richard some props there for quoting some Ron Burgundy. I spent a lot of time down in San Diego, and I love the whole, wrote in my diary, laughed about it later. That's all about Ron Burgundy. So props to you on that one, Richard. And as far as someone I really dislike, I love everybody. I really do. I don't have a lot of hatred for anybody. But if you want to say someone I don't have a whole lot of respect for, someone that irks me a little bit, I'd probably go with Kyler Murray. just because you got a guy here that the Cardinals a couple of years ago gave him a $230 million contract. And when you've got to put a clause in, or at least attempt to put a clause into a contract that says that you actually have to study the playbook once in a while, I think that speaks volumes to the player. And then when you've got a guy who's top 10 in salary, what's he making? $43 million a year, Richard, something like that. And he's bottom 20, 25 in the league in yards per game. I just don't think he's lived up to his billing. I don't think he's lived up to his contract. And so therefore, I'll throw that out there. But still got love for him and hope he succeeds.
Richard, I know you're a nice guy, so are you going to respond to the Kyler Murray comment, number one? And then there has to be a player that bugs you in this division the most as well.
Yeah, I am going to respond to the Kyler Murray comment. Kyle, I'm putting it down in my diary. Now, I'm going to write it down because, like I said, I don't keep receipts. I get it down in the diary. Kyle was talking smack about Kyler Murray. And guess what? When I put it down in the diary, 60% of the time, it works every time. So just remember that, right? And when it comes to talking smack, I'm not a hateful person, right? I'm more of a lover, not a fighter, even though I got in a lot of fights as a kid, but they were all breakdance fights. I was a member of the mob, the Masters of Breaking. We'd go to the quinceañeras and wait for the old people to get tired of dancing to the Mexican music and would come out and break dance. And we were pretty good. We battled the IBM, the Incredible Breaking Mechanics, the Floor Rockers, and all that. So I was a breakdance fighter, not a real fighter. But if I had to talk smack about somebody, it would have to be Christian McCaffrey, because what he's done to my chimichangas. I mean, we were expecting him to be our lead back, and then of course he hasn't played all year. But because I'm loyal, these colors don't run, guys. Okay, I still have Christian McCaffrey on my roster, and hopefully he can come back after the bye week. But that's as bad as it gets for me when it comes to talking smack.
And Bailey, bring us home tonight. Who are you firing shots at?
I don't know if you could see, but my jaw hit the ground when you said George Kittle. I don't know anyone who doesn't like George Kittle. He's just like the happiest person. He said in his interview with Fox at halftime of the Niner game a couple weeks back, he's not a glass half full, glass half empty guy. He's a glass overflowing guy. I don't know how you can't like him. But I'm going to say I had tied for two guys tied, both of which have been mentioned, DK Metcalf and Kyler Murray. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day saying, can you imagine in my contract if they put, hey, Bailey, you know, we're going to hire you for this job. We know you love sports, but we want to make sure you're going to actually watch the football games. Like, can you please actually watch them? So, like, that clause in Kyler's contract to study the playbook, that's always kind of bugged me. In the Niners locker room, they call him the squirrel. He's just all over the place. But, you know, no hate to anybody. But if there was one guy, I'd probably say Kyler Murray. I just think he hasn't lived up to the Kyler hype. And I think that clause in his contract, well, when it came out, it went viral, but it's something you just don't forget, you know?
Absolutely. Well, guys, glad we got that off of our chest. It has been a ton of fun. I'm also glad this is not a baseball show. Again, congratulations to the Dodgers, but I can beat my chest in saying that the Mariners have never lost a World Series because they are the only team that have never gotten there before. It's been a fun. Again, thanks for joining all of us here on the NFC West Huddle, and we will see you all next week.